C.S.I. contains graphic images that may not be suitable for younger audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to the first ever episode of Conspiracy, Speculations, and Ideologies. Now, each episode from here on out will have one of us telling a story about some sort of theory, some sort of effect in general, that we're going to give you the original report on it, and then give you the conspiracy evidence, and then go on to discuss whether we think it's fact or fiction. And of course, one of the best theories of all time to discuss is that of John F. Kennedy and his assassination. Now, John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, was assassinated on November 22nd of 1963 after a 10-month investigation from the Warren Commission. It was indeed said that Lee Harvey Oswald acted solely on this, firing 3 shots, 2 of which hit Kennedy himself, along with Mayor John Connally, and the second shot hitting Kennedy in the head and being fatal. Now, it was very quickly that speculations came up. We just weren't sure exactly, it didn't really make sense for one shooter. And then, I think a lot of what came with that was that people just didn't want somebody that nobody knew, this very irregular person, taking out this powerful entity that was John F. Kennedy. But, it was very clear that we weren't sure where shots came from. For example, let's start with the magic bullet theory. This is one that everybody goes into right away. Mm-hmm. The second shot, let's start with the first shot. The first shot that was apparently shot by Lee Harvey Oswald missed left, hit the bridge in the background beyond the car. The second shot went through John F. Kennedy's throat and then ended up going through Mayor Connally, went through his ribs, shattered his ribs, when it hit his wrist, shattered his wrist, and then ended up going through his left thigh. That's where it ended up stopping. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if you just saw the pattern of which I just showed, but so that means the bullet would have to go through Kennedy's throat.
At a downward angle.
Curved down, go through Connally's ribcage, go through his wrist, and then hook back left and go through his thigh. Now,
that's a curve once, twice, 3 times. That's about 3 times the curve of bullet.
So, yeah, as you can see, that pretty much already is very questionable. So ultimately, it's not so much that Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do the shooting, but it seems like from some other angle, there was another shot. Mm-hmm. So one of the big things here, everyone always says there's 3 shots. It seems that there was at least 4 in order to hit Mayor Connally along with Kennedy. And it also doesn't happen at the same time. If you watch the reaction within the footage of the actual shooting, you see Kennedy clench his fists and react and, put his hand to his throat. Mm-hmm. At that time, Connally doesn't react at all.
Not yet.
Not yet. It's a good 11 frames, I believe, afterwards.
Several frames.
Yeah, he finally reacts, and there's like a clench in his arm. Mm-hmm. So, timing doesn't fit, along with the angles just don't really make sense in that situation. Yes, of course, that's your magic bullet theory. That's one of the biggest and strongest evidence that goes with this theory. Now, of course, there's also the grassy knoll. Now, this is where, if they said there was a second shooter, it makes sense for the shooter to be within that grassy knoll that was off to
that one plaza.
Yeah, it was up to the front right of the car. Now, this evidence is supported by, for one, when you actually see John F. Kennedy get shot, his head, the way he reacts on the third shot, that is, when it actually does hit him in the head, mm-hmm. It appears that he gets hit from the front side. Appears that he gets hit from the front, and his head jolts back left. And he does fall to his left mm-hmm. in a backwards manner. So if Lee Harvey Oswald did the shooting, he was on the 6th floor behind him.
In not the library, but one of his work, he worked at the facility wherever he was, up on the 6th floor.
So the angle would have been over here, So
if anything, if it was shot behind him, he would jolt frontward.
Right. So that's one of the things that say, it doesn't make sense the way that he reacted. Of course, you don't really, when a body gets hit in the brain, you don't know what impulse comes with that.
Right.
So that evidence isn't exactly solid.
100% proven.
Right. But it really is quite odd that he clearly does do this. He does jolt back. And then it's hard to tell, especially even watching it in slow motion. It's hard to tell exactly where the exit wound is. But we will come back to that with more evidence. But first of all, one of the biggest things is people recall hearing a gunshot from the grassy knoll. People that were there at the parade were certain that a shot came from the grassy knoll. And in fact, some people even charged at the grassy knoll in order to stop a shooter. At least so they claim. Once again, you can't 100% prove that. A lot of people say that the CIA and the Secret Service, along with the Warren Commission, went to these people and made sure that they stayed quiet. Though that's stuff where you're getting into thick conspiracy theories and
uncertainty that you cannot prove.
That's kind of stuff that it doesn't really come with supported evidence. But it does, even when you watch the footage, it does appear that people run away from the grassy knoll because they're pretty certain that they heard a shot coming from there. So that's another thing that supports the idea of there being another shooter. Now, let's go in, because I think one of the biggest things is that the government was involved in the actual shooting, right? That the government either paid Lee Harvey Oswald or
influenced him to do this act in the whole in general.
Right. Now, legally, when you die, when there's a murder in a city or there's a death in a city, that's where the autopsy should be done, right? In the case of John F. Kennedy, that was not the case. Coroners in Dallas did indeed look at his body, and there's 3 different coroners to follow that evidence. But an official autopsy was not done. The Secret Service took his body.
Right. The reason for that is because Jackie Kennedy, they needed to get out of Dallas.
Right.
And so they just decided to take him with.
Right. But, of course, legally, that's not supposed to happen. He is the president. Right. I guess he gets a little bit of leadway.
He'll get a free pass this time.
He gets different, accessibilities with that. There's videos with him and the wife in one of the airplanes, Air Force One.
Right. So, and of course, Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in on Air Force One right after that, after they got the body.
JFK's wife.
With JFK Kennedy.
So where this gets fishy, okay? So they didn't get to do an official autopsy. Secret Service took his body, took it on an Air Force One in a casket. Now, there was always somebody with that casket, except for the 5 minutes in Air Force One that Lyndon B. Johnson was being sworn in. That's the only time his body wasn't being watched. Now, it appears that from autopsy pictures that were taken in Washington, D.C., where the official autopsy happened, that there was some sort of surgery done. There's pictures to claim this as well. On the front, on the forehead of John F. Kennedy,
of his forehead.
To make it appears that it was to make it look like the shot did come from behind his head, and that this was indeed an exit wound. Now, the 3 Dallas coroners that did look at the body said that there was a massive, it's in their notes, a massive exit wound on the back of his head. So 3 different coroners confirmed that the shot came from the front and went out the back of his head. Now, when he went to D.C., that was no longer the case, claiming that the shot came from the back and went out the front. But like I said, there's a lot of gray area here because,
one side saying something, the other side saying something else.
And then these Dallas coroners are saying that is not what it is. It looks like somebody messed with the head of John F. Kennedy. What makes that so suspicious is because the only time that his body wasn't being watched was on Air Force One, which means it would have been somebody on the inside to do that surgery, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where things get really questionable. And then it gets even worse because the coroner that did the autopsy in Washington, D.C. had never done a gunshot wound autopsy. So he never properly tracked the wound and the direction in which it went. That's another issue. Obviously, you'd understand that that's an issue. That's something that needs to be addressed in a gunshot wound autopsy. So that's an issue. And then on top of that, the notes that he took during that autopsy suddenly disappeared. They were burned away. That's where I'm like,
anyone,
oh boy.
Even people who don't believe in conspiracies with that have to say that's suspicious in a sense.
Yeah.
Seriously,
really.
That is. Anybody who even believes that he just died, that is suspicious. That the notes that was taken of that are just gone.
Right. So, and the fact that they took the time to take his body from the Dallas, illegally take his body from the Dallas coroner. You know, have some sort of odd, you know, not watching the body during the swearing in of Lyndon B. Johnson. Having a unbelievably inexperienced coroner do the autopsy in D.C., and then suddenly the notes disappearing as well. A lot of gray area and a lot of things that just don't make sense.
Draw suspicion.
Now, the question is, why? Where's the motive for the government to do such a thing? And, you know, who are the culprits in general? Of course, when this was being discussed in the first place, the mafia was discussed, okay? Lyndon B. Johnson himself was discussed in order to get into the power of the president. I don't think that's the case. The Illuminati,
Of course,
you know, well, in the CIA, of course.
Yeah.
You know, just CIA in general. So, you know, the motive is what is important here. And I do think there was certain motive that was key for the government to take out John F. Kennedy. You know, right before all this happened, right before the assassination of JFK, he was saying speeches that included NATO and saying that we need to come together and stop the violence that's going on in war, and ultimately end up, you know, removing armies in general, except for internal policing. So just get rid of our militant armies in general, right? Now, that's a bold statement as a president.
Right, and a lot of people, you know, latched onto that. JFK is one of the smartest people ever. He was very smart.
But for him to do that, that puts a target on his back right away.
Yeah, especially coming from the powerhouse that is the United States. Like, you know, we take a lot of, you know, credit for our, like, how power hungry we are, you know. So when that's approached, especially at the time in the 60s, right? Especially right after this, we hopped into Vietnam, right? So that's another questionable thing. It's like, you know, JFK was suddenly saying, hey, we should stop all war, get rid of armies, and have peace within this world.
A lot of positivity.
Yeah, and suddenly he's assassinated, and then not long after, we're hopping into Vietnam.
Yeah, that
brings up a lot of questions. You know, that it just doesn't make sense to that degree. And also, JFK was really big into, you know, letting the citizens of the United States in on what's going on within the government.
Yep.
So, like, certain secrets maybe, or certain things that we shouldn't be discussed between us, citizens, and the government, was being pushed forward by JFK. So there's another motive for the government in general. Secrets that they're trying to keep, and that JFK feels that we should have known. So, motive, I think it's there for the government.
I think that's highly. I think, and that's why a lot of the conspiracies of the government influencing it, that's where they're from, because they, you know, that's all evidence to prove of that. You know, just by what he has been said and wanted to do, there's your motive for people to create this conspiracy theories towards the government.
Yeah, you know, there's so much evidence that goes on. This conspiracy goes on forever, and there are people, like, I'm by no means an expert on the situation, something I'm interested in, which is why I wanted to bring it to you guys today to discuss it, because there's so much there, and it's definitely worth discussing. The thing is, though, man, there's my story. What are we thinking? Fact or fiction surrounding the conspiracies of the JFK assassination?
I think definitely pieces of conspiracies do mark more interest and belief, for me at least. Definitely think the government had a hand in it, and I definitely think they kick-started the idea, especially like because Lee Harvey Oswald, for example, you know, he came back in the States from Russia, brought his girlfriend at the time, future wife,
right,
etc. And you know, he ended up shooting the president for the factual evidence is there, which I believe he did shoot him.
It's also interesting that Lee Harvey Oswald was indeed killed himself right after this too. So
we got him, right? Then he killed himself, correct?
Well, he didn't kill himself. He was murdered.
Or murdered, right? He was murdered, right.
So that's interesting as well. You know, was that an inside job, killing Lee Harvey Oswald?
Because was the government worried that he was going to spill something?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, JFK was very beloved by the United States population.
Everyone loved him as a president.
So
because he was so open with communication.
He was almost like they viewed him as just another citizen in with them. You know?
Right. So let's address these one at a time, whether we think it's fact or fiction. And you're open to your opinion. That's totally okay. Do you think there was a second shooter, or do you think there was at least more than one shooter other than Lee Harvey Oswald?
I do. Yes.
I do too.
I'll probably say yes because there's so many. Not evidence, but a lot of persuasion of the citizens. I think there have been.
Right. I think
and there's evidence for the bullet. The bullet literally makes me feel like.
Right. The angle of the bullet hitting Conley doesn't make sense, and on top of that, it's based on the autopsy, especially from the Dallas coroners who have come on to speak in interviews about the situation. It seems very clear to me that he was indeed hit from the front. You know, in
the headshot.
Yeah,
right?
It seems like he was hit from the front, and the exit wound comes out the back of his head. Of course, can't prove that, but that's kind of how I feel the situation based on the evidence I've seen. Now, how about do you think it was the government that was involved? Fact or fiction on that one?
Again, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy nerd or anything.
Yeah.
But you look at all the evidence that's put forward, and how can you say no? Absolutely not. I do believe that the government had a plan. Once JFK started, spitting too much truth. I do think they had a hand in, or 100% plan this. Yeah.
Wow. I do definitely think to a degree that the government was involved. Now, I think they may have hired Lee Harvey Oswald in general to be part of it, because Lee Harvey Oswald was a very, very trained and deadly sniper. So the fact that he was the one that took the motive, and then the lack of him getting away also doesn't make sense to me. Like, he left the gun in the room. Like, of course we were gonna find the just, I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me either. What do you think? Do you think the government?
I think the government had a hand with that, with the assassination. By, like Nick said, the evidence that's there, and of course that's not there, also pulls weight. That I think the government had a piece in it.
The motive.
The motive's there.
What was Lee Harvey Oswald's real motive? Just to say,
no,
I'm gonna murder this man.
And this is the show that I've seen. I'm gonna make you guys watch it also. 11/22/63. It's a Hulu original. I bought the Blu-ray. Everything. I love it. It's a great show. It's very, very well shot and everything. But
great cinematography.
Amazing. But it really goes in the depth of him coming back from the country and him actually not agreeing with the government. He didn't want, he was against how awful the government has been treating people that come back, and he disagreed with all that, and he didn't want anything to do with that. He loved his country. He really did. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the senators and everybody, the government, pretty much twisted him into doing that. Twisted his arm in a sense. Because he didn't want. He came back from the country with a wife, and you know what I mean. And that's what I feel. It's a TV show, but however, I've done some research also, and I believe that he come back from country and he's going to kill the president. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think
he was going to do that.
That makes sense either.
I do think that Lee Harvey Oswald then being assassinated after, I think that was just
an angry citizen.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think that was planned. I don't think they said, all right, you're going to do that. We're going to pay you. Hey, now we're going to hire this guy so we don't have to pay him. I don't think that was the case.
One of the original theories that you heard is that the guy that killed him, I'm zoning on his name right now, I should be ashamed of myself, but that he was involved in the assassination of JFK as well.
Oh, I've seen something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but that's a whole other different conspiracy.
Yeah, and and Lee Harvey Oswald's mom, I remember even coming out and saying that he would never have done that, or
well, he
it's his
pulled
mom.
The trigger.
He pulled the trigger. But he himself, you know what I mean? I know.
Right.
She's come out and said some things about it that him himself as a human being wouldn't have done that.
I tell you what, though, the government did hire Lee Harvey Oswald, and they said you're going to be out. They Black Ops hired him,
Yeah.
he straight up got screwed, man. They were after him so fast. Like,
Yeah.
He's probably somebody like,
Well,
you guys told me I'd be fine. What the hell? I could totally imagine that.
But I could also see why they'd pick him, because he was a trained...
He was a great shooter, yeah.
Like, he knew how to assemble and guns and all, et cetera, things like that, where he can do that, and he's way more experienced than anyone.
Well, even from the shot in general, it's very clear that he was a good shooter.
He was a good marksman.
He was a very trained,
very trained marksman to be able to do that. And you can't have a guy that's mediocre pulling that stunt.
Right. That's why that's another thing. Like we said that right at first in the episode is that like having somebody that's just an ordinary guy take the shot and kill JFK is, I think that's just something that's really hard to stick with the citizens. It's just like
there's something else. Like that's just a human being aspect of everybody thinking, the highest man in our country, the president, just being killed by a random man.
Yeah, I think
that doesn't stick with people. Like, oh, that happens. No, they in their right minds, they think something's deeper than that.
Yeah, I do have one more fact or fiction question. So, a lot of it jumped to Lyndon B. Johnson, right? Do you think that Lyndon B. Johnson was involved in the decision to kill JFK? If it was indeed the government, of course,
that's.
But do you think Johnson was involved in that decision?
I do. If this was done by the government, and they're gonna have to let him know, like, hey, you're gonna be president. He wanted to be president. That was the thing. He wanted to be president. So I'm sure the opportunity came up. I don't think if he would have been like, no, don't do this, they wouldn't have gone through with it. And then if he talked, maybe. A double assassination.
I'm not so sure that if they would have told him, because I actually think what you just said right there. If he talked, that's an issue, and you have no way of knowing whether Johnson is willing to say something like, because he still was good friends with Kennedy, right? I mean, he was a vice president for a reason,
right?
So saying that, like, I don't know if he actually knew ahead of time.
I feel like it might have been better if he didn't.
Yeah,
really. Though.
Yeah, I ultimately don't think it was his decision.
He might have known a little bit about it. But I don't know. I really honestly, because I get what you're saying. Because they're killing the guy. He has to. You feel like he would know something.
Right.
Get him not to talk like, hey, you're going to be the president. You want to be the president, right? you want a guaranteed shot to be the president? Now, here you go. This is what we're doing.
Yeah. Man.
Right. Yeah. I mean, then he wasn't there on the day, but I think if I was the government, I think it's safer to not tell him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he could have known. Yeah. But there's a ton of people that are culprits to the situation that are accused culprits. I mean, even Jackie, even his wife was accused, right? Like people are like, well, she was involved. I don't think so. People all say her reaction wasn't genuine, and that the way she's grabbing at the back, she looks scared shitless. If you're asking me,
I've seen the video.
Yeah,
I've seen the video. She was freaking out.
Yeah, she climbs out the back of the car.
Her husband was just murdered right there. She sees it.
Yeah, so
people react differently.
Yeah, that's another one that doesn't really hold up for me. But that's the JFK assassination in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Obviously, we think there's some sort of truth surrounding the conspiracy theories.
Yeah, they're not all right. This is all speculation, most likely.
But we're never going to know the real truth, so it's going to be all left to speculation.
Yeah.
So that is the first ever episode of C.S.I. If you guys enjoyed, first of all, let us know. We're not sure if we should keep this thing going. This is our pilot episode. We want to see the reactions from you. But if you did enjoy, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. And thank you guys so much for watching. And we'll see you next time.